started if we could. First, a couple of announcements. Uh, Brent isn't going to make it today. He's attending a funeral. Sad, somebody passed away over the holiday season. Uh, Second, we have a new representative here, Jeff Williams, who will be the city council person that's going to attend as opposed to Chuck Stadig. So welcome, glad to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, the first action item is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, one more announcement. Dave, I thought would be here, but his term expired December 31st. Vivian called in sick, she won't be here, and Red has resigned. So there's 7 members, we have a bare quorum, so we'll go ahead with the 4. Okay, I apologize, I interrupted a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a Zoom?
A Zoom?
Is anybody joining?
You can't join by Zoom. You can,
No, there's no Zoom, there's YouTube.
you can watch it being streamed, but not dial in to vote. Okay, so I apologize, a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll approve it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Okay. So item 2 is an action item. So this isn't something that I put on the agenda and isn't required by the bylaws or the city code. So I was a little surprised to see it, but I don't object to it. I had indicated last time that if anybody wanted to have this on the agenda, please send it to me and I would add it, but they didn't, and so I didn't. However, it is on here as an action item to vote for me. So we can do that, or we can take a nomination, or whatever the
Mr. Chairman, your name is just simply there because you're the chairman of the moment, or the chairman we're carrying over in lieu of selecting a new chairman. So that's just a matter of more convenience.
And I appreciate that, but there's no need. I wasn't going to have it on here unless one of the commission members wanted it on the agenda.
Well, so the implication would be then we'd operate without a chairman? I mean,
well, there's no term limit on the chairmanship in the bylaws or the city code, as near as I can tell.
That is certainly correct, yes. So you could simply just remain as chairman without action.
Or,
the custom in the past has been to select a chairman each year, but that by no means has to carry forward that way.
And I assume I could be removed by a vote of the commission
Sure.
anytime, regardless of
Sure.
The date.
Yeah, it's according to the bylaws, it's up to the members of the commission to determine who would be the chair. But you're correct that there is not a limit specifically on that
okay.
chairmanship. So you're right, and you could simply skip that action item.
I'll get it. It's on here. I'm fine with it. So
okay.
No problem. But I just want to be sure we coordinate agenda items so that we're all on the same page. Okay, so this is an action item. If I'd entertain any discussion.
I just move that you remain as our chairman for 2023.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Vivian emailed in an aye as well, so thank you. Okay, number 3 is status of 5001 Aviation Way. So I asked Brent where this stood. I think it goes to the city council on the 17th of January. Then it goes to the auction house, and then it goes for sale. So somewhere in the first half of March, I'm hoping it will be sold. You recall the appraised value was $460. I assume there'll be some fees from the auctioneer. Maybe we'll get $460, maybe not. But whatever it is, it will be a nice boost to our budget. And it was in the pro forma. I forget the amount. But in any event, hopefully somewhere in March, that will be finished. Okay, the 4th item was mine. Dave Carson's term expired. I'm advised the mayor has put a hold on his making any appointments, but regardless, I think it's still up to us to recommend someone if we believe we would like them to be on the commission. So I think Dave is still interested in participating. He's not here, and I haven't heard why, but any discussion on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I know there's been a lot of discussion about airport commissioners, and since I'm just getting to know people, I'll just ask the question, does he live in the city of Caldwell? Because I know there's some concern about there being residents on that council, and so we may be facing some of those questions when we get back to the mayor and the council on these. And I don't know, Dave, so I have no bias in the question, but overhearing you earlier, there may be another vacant seat as well. And so we've got a couple of things to be considering in this regard, and I'm just looking for information here.
Okay, the answer, pardon me?
Marsing?
Actually, he lives in Canyon County still, though. He's on this side of the river.
Okay, so. But he doesn't live in Caldwell, which was the basic question, so.
I'm building a shop right next to his house. It's on this side of the river. Still Canyon County, but not in Hawaii.
So, I guess let's follow up on that for just a
Sure.
second. I don't live in the city either. Do you live in the city? No? No. I assume you do, or you wouldn't be on the council. So,
And it's just, I think, something for us to take into consideration as we move ahead, because what I don't want to do is see us get ahead of what, since the mayor has
Right.
said, let's stand by, we may want to get some more direction from him and or the council before we get too far down the road. Our concern, I think, is twofold, certainly. One of my biggest concerns is that we have the right people on the commission, that we have people that are serving the city of Caldwell. But certainly, I think there's an interest, and secondly, for stakeholders to be included by way of residents. I'm not against it. Obviously, I just moved that you be our chairman again, and I was aware that you don't live in the city because we spoke recently. So that's not necessarily a problem, but might be wise for us as we think through what we're doing next.
okay,
To get some more direction,
okay,
rather than getting ahead of ourselves.
okay. Thank you for that. Does anybody know if Vivian lives in Caldwell? She has a business here,
She's also in Canyon County, but she's closer to Green.
but she doesn't live within the city limits. Okay,
We have a business, of course.
right. So she has a business at the airport, as you probably know. Let me think. So, we're gonna have a vacancy for Red. I don't think Red lives in the city either, but she's gone. So, well, do you believe it's, let me think.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
Of our city council liaison? In the mindset, what is the mindset of whether you live in the city of Caldwell or if those of us are hangar owners in Caldwell? Now, I know the surface is I don't get a vote for you because I'm not a resident. I assume, because although I do vote in Caldwell, so.
Where else do you vote?
I vote in Bonner Fieldhouse, so, but I just want to understand, because like we've had conversations, I pay a lot of taxes on my hangar because I don't get homeowners exemption. So when it comes to a tax base, I have every right to complain how that money's being spent, yes, no, or indifferent. Where does it matter that I live in Nampa versus Caldwell, even though I own hangars in Caldwell, is my question.
Yeah, that's a fair question, Randy. I think it'd be unwise for me to speak for the entire council. I think my suggestion maybe today is that we maybe get some more direction before we get too far ahead of ourselves. As long as we still have a quorum to move ahead with.
Sure.
If we didn't, I would say let's go ahead and discuss it so that we could stay ahead of that curve.
Okay,
But what I would rather not do is embarrass anybody and say, the commission has decided to put this forward, and then we get instructions that don't mesh well
fair enough.
with where we're operating.
I understand.
And so, knowing, as your liaison, I'm just gonna tell you what's being discussed, and it's been public record as well. So
Okay.
the questions have been asked in public record about that. And so it's a suggestion.
I guess, fair enough, and we can certainly do that. I guess I'd add two things. One is, all the people that we just mentioned that aren't, in Caldwell were appointed by this mayor. So maybe there's rethinking of this process, so, I hope he doesn't have regrets about anybody that's appointed. Second, there's been some discussion about the commission's role in, selecting or appointing or vetting candidates for the commission. And the last few, the commission wasn't consulted. So, and I think it is ambiguous as to how that's supposed to work. So I guess my preference would be that it be more of a work together process on coming up with the next commission member, if we can do that.
I could agree with you more. I think one of the things I'd like to see in the coming year, now that I'm sitting on this with you, is that the ambiguities that exist, be dealt with. I think it's unfortunate that there is ambiguity, and we need to be clear, and we need to, if we're going to have an airport commission, which we do, we need to include them in these decisions to have, I don't wanna see a commission that is just a figurehead, that's by name only a commission,
Right.
but doesn't operate as a commission. And so now that I'm selected for this position, I'm interested in seeing that we get the collaboration working at an optimum level. And I would certainly think that for a commission position, there should be some input from the commission. And we need to be taking that seriously. On the other hand, it's a city airport owned by the city and run by the city. And so the responsibility lies therein. Because I've seen where it appears sometimes that in the past, the commission has operated as if they've forgotten that it's a city airport. I'm not suggesting anybody here, but I would say that, I take note of what you just stated, and I want to be sure that we're doing everything we can, and I will do everything I can, if there is any ambiguity, to be sure we're, clearing that up. And, one of my questions today, and we'll get to it, is I want to be sure we're clear on what our responsibilities are. We've had a lot of discussion about it lately. Has that cleared it up? But I don't know if that helps or not.
I like your last point about what our responsibilities are, and, that deserves some discussion. Okay, so, your feeling is we should hold off on Dave. I guess I'm okay with that. I would like to see us sort of flesh out the commission in the next few weeks if we can do that. I think the mayor has scheduled meetings with each of the commissioners to get input. That process will probably be completed in, I don't know, by the end of January. I don't know exactly what his dates are. So, Timothy?
I couldn't agree more with what you said, so right on board.
Randy? Okay, all right.
And again, this is no reflection on Dave. I don't even know him. I hope he would understand being here. I'm not speaking against him at all. I'm speaking for a process that I think we can, live with beyond today.
I take it, Seth.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Okay, so we'll hold off on that. Farmhouse development agreement. I guess it says Brent and Rob, but I guess that'll be Rob.
The development agreement is essentially in the same place it was at our last meeting. Unfortunately, the Christmas holiday season put a whammy on some of our paperwork. So we are finalizing that draft to be delivered to the developer, and from there we will continue the negotiation. But there's really nothing new to report today. Progress has been accomplished, yes, but we're not quite done with it.
Okay, well, so you had told me a couple times you would send that to me to review prior to going to the winning bidder. So is...
We haven't reached that point yet either. I mean, you know, I agree, and I did say that, yes.
So I guess I'd rather start this sooner rather than later, so I'm not, we can do these things in parallel rather than sequentially, so that I'm not sort of the holdup for a week between when you and the city attorney finish it and when Wright gets it. So is that something you could send to me in the next few days and put draft all over it? I get that?
Of course, yes.
Okay.
No, I'm happy to do that, with the understanding that there's still considerable adjustments to be made
Fair enough.
to it. But anyway, absolutely, I can do that, yes.
Okay, perfect. So you may know that we had, there was a review committee on October 12th. We sent our recommendation up to the city, to Rob, and I think the winner was selected. So we're 2.5 months out, and so I know the city council wants the revenue. So we're doing everything we can to make that happen. So, okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, let me ask you this. So in the development agreement, is there some particular point that's just difficult to resolve, or is it just a matter of sort of refining the wording, or
Yes.
both?
Uh,
I mean, I can understand why
none
it
of the,
would be-
none of the points are particularly difficult. It's just a matter of getting through, a draft contract, basically,
Okay,
and adapting it to this purpose.
okay,
So, no, it's not a difficult thing. I don't want to throw the player in question under the bus since he's out of town at the moment. But he, is saddled with a great many duties. And,
is that, our city attorney?
no, he did his part.
Is that Brent?
I shouldn't say.
Never mind, okay, I apologize, I shouldn't push you on that. Okay, good enough. Thank-
But it's not that he doesn't want to get it completed, but there's been a lot of things going on,
Okay,
so.
thank you.
Okay.
Then as long as you're there, 4510 Aviation Way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 4510 Aviation Way is on the agenda today as a discussion item to hopefully gain some input from the Airport Commission. That particular address is the building across the street, across Aviation Way from the Silverhawk fuel pump area. It's a house that was on the property when the city acquired this property for the airport. It came under the auspices of the airport, the grant with which we obtained the property. So that strip of land across Aviation Way, though it has no access to runway and taxiway system, still comes under the umbrella of aeronautical use guidelines by FAA. So over the years, we've made a variety of uses of it, some closer to full aeronautical purposes, others drifting a little farther from that. Recently, the building has been rented by the skydiving company for use as a parachute repair facility. So they've had commercial size sewing machines and things like that in there. And they have opted to not renew their lease, which was as I want to recall, 5 years at a time, a short-term agreement. So the building itself is not in very good condition, and I don't want to try to upsell this too hard. They did put some paint on it when they took over it some years ago. That paint has faded. They have not done a great job of maintaining the landscaping around it, which we'll generously call landscaping. There's some plumbing issues. Anyway, much the same level of conversation as we've had about the old farmhouse building where the cafe is located. 4510 building is a similar vintage. And so it's a very old building, difficult to keep serviceable if we have an appropriate use for it. I'm not sure that we do, but I'm looking for sort of brainstorming input.
So are you getting per square foot lease or more like a dwelling or building?
It's a building. We were, Lisa, was it I want to say $500 per month is what we were deriving from that building.
And if I understand it from prior discussions, the airport prefers not to be in the landlord role. You'd rather, I mean, the farmhouse, you don't want to be a landlord. The idea there was to tear it down and lease the land and let somebody build something
Yes.
that was in compliance. So I don't recall that in the master plan there was anything in particular for that space. Do you have some ideas as to what the airport or the city would like to have there, or what the path forward might be?
The classic answer to that, Mr. Chairman, would be a parking lot.
There you go.
It's not beyond the pale that the building, the hangar facility and cafe that replaces the existing structure across the street may well need additional parking. So I mean, I may not be far-fetched in that somewhat lighthearted suggestion. But other possibilities certainly exist. It's just tricky to come up with an appropriate user that will pass aeronautical muster. Because if it's somebody, let me rephrase. whoever it is and whatever the activity is, we need to submit through FAA, as we do for any of these non-hangar type uses. The hangars are clearly aeronautical use, and we're charged with making sure that's the case. But these few other leases that we have for a few parcels about the airport are for sometimes aeronautical purposes, sometimes something that's not aeronautical, and if it's not, we do have to have specific permission from FAA to enter into that lease.
But if it was a parking lot for Silverhawk or the cafe or whatever, that would be aeronautical use. And if they rented it for, or put an office up there for offices, or if it has an aeronautical use, whether it's a parking lot or whatever, the city's objective is to get the 40 cents a square foot or some amount, as opposed to being a landlord.
It's certainly desirable to derive revenue from it, yes. At what level is, you know, if it's a non-aeronautical application, it has to be a market rate.
Can it be a non-aeronautical? I understood from your comments that it had to be
It
aeronautical.
can be with FAA concurrence.
Okay.
So there are certain things they will permit us to do, and I suspect they would be fairly tolerant on this land. But we can't, well, as I was thinking to myself, we can't replace it with another house. Because residential uses on the airport are not permitted explicitly. But as I was thinking those words in my head, it also dawned on me that it could be a hotel. You know, if we had a hotel, because that serves the traveling public more broadly as an aeronautical related use.
Do you know how many square feet that plot is?
No, not specifically, but the area itself is pretty big.
I mean, this parcel, if I said house, I meant the parcel that this is.
We don't have it subdivided, let's put it that way. So it's the area between Aviation Way and the delightful water feature nearer to the freeway. So, as I say, I'm sort of in a brainstorming mode.
Okay.
No specific decision is needed, but it ranges from that parking lot, which could imply that we plan to get rid of the building. We could, with appropriate permissions and all that, we could engage the fire department to consume the building in their training.
Right.
I mean, there's a variety of things that are possible there.
When do they stop paying rent?
I think their lease is completed.
So there's no more $500 a month coming in.
So we're only now working with them on the process for turning it back over to us, and depending to some degree on what we determine will be the future for that building and parcel, will help determine how much we insist they do to finish up their time there.
Okay, so is there a process for sort of this brainstorming part of the discussion? I mean, are you gonna, maybe from the people that are going to do the developing of the farmhouse or Silverhawk or other businesses in the area, sort of just, hey, if you had this, what would you do with it? I mean, how do we?
Well, Silverhawk already wants a parking lot. And they've already made that indication that they're actually willing to help create that parking lot, given the fact that this 4510 building already exists. Their thought about a parking lot is next door, basically. The rub is that Silverhawk's, and by Silverhawk I don't mean Timothy, I more mean Catherine. We'll let her fall under the bus for this conversation. She would like to put down some gravel and make a parking lot, and which sounds perfectly fine to most people, but it sounds less fine to the city's building department and their inspectors because of rules related to creating a parking lot. And Randy's probably familiar with these, perhaps Jeff as well. Timothy, because of association with this whole brainstorming idea. But a parking lot implies that we're going to follow certain rules, and that frequently involves asphalt, a non-impervious surface, or an impervious surface, I should say. And the other thing we have to double check is There's a little swale there that allows access, for drain water to run off in, storms and such beside the road. You have to provide an appropriate crossing for that to get from the road into your parking lot. At the moment, when you drive by there, you'll notice, when the weather's decent, that vehicles are already making temporary use of that land. They just drive through. But when you make an official parking area, you have to be more intentional about it, and you have to follow the rules. And that involves, depending on the size of the parking lot, potentially 2 access points, a certain distance apart, with little culvert pipes with appropriate cover over them. There's a lot of things. And what those lot of things imply and translate into is extra cost. A few truckloads of gravel, which Silverhawk students would spread out, is different from a preparing a base and then a compaction and an asphalt surface and more compaction and those culverts. Anyway.
Okay.
Plans, reviews, tax, title, dealer dock fees, everything.
Randy, any questions, comments, input?
Can we explore, can that property be carved off and sold and it go into our coffers, much like that hangar is for future airport growth, since it is kind of segregated from the airport use?
You know, that's an interesting question, and in the time before Randy, we had an inquiry about a question along these lines for a different parcel on the airport, where we thought that it might make sense to do exactly that, for what we thought were some pretty good reasons. Being the relatively new airport manager that I was at the time, I took that notion to an in-person meeting with our FAA partners in Seattle. And the response I got to that was, so you want to give back land that we've helped you buy, on the one hand, and yet over here, elsewhere on your airport drawing, you want us to buy more land. So what are we saying here? You don't need the land you've already got, but yet you want more. So they had a hard time reconciling that, and I'm trying to be as polite as possible as to how I explain this, because I was not treated very well over that.
And I could see that logic if it was a piece that's on the north side of aviation, but where that piece is, can never be with that argument.
They are still very, very slow and require some very significant hurdles to jump to make that idea work. It's not out of the question, but I'm just telling you, we've tried in another space and it backfired pretty badly on us.
So a slight variance to that would be to trade it for the land that we want instead of selling it. Would that, where we want land, do you think a trade would work?
It doesn't seem very likely.
Okay.
You know, at the very least, we would retain that land, because we're not just simply talking about the parcel where this house is.
Right.
If we start talking in those terms, we have quite a long strip of land, right, across Aviation Way, which is forming basically our buffer between Aviation Way and the water feature.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
So it sounds like this is a fairly new development. They're still in the building, and we're in the process of them moving on from the building. Doesn't sound like anything needs to be decided today. These are the kinds of things that I think your airport commission needs to be involved in, and so we probably could take a little bit of time now to think about this and do some brainstorming. I think with time, I might have some questions. I'm liking listening to the questions. Randy's question was one of mine, and I wouldn't have asked it, but it was what I was contemplating, because we would do well to think through carefully before we jump in on anything. And it doesn't sound like time is of the essence in this case anyway. So perhaps this could be put on our next agenda item as well.
Sure.
And, that would give us some time to process something that's just been kind of brought up, it sounds like for the first time. And it probably is true that other people are just now finding out that that may be available and could approach you in the meantime and say, hey, we have an interest in that land as well. Because that would serve all of us well to have more options, rather than right now trying to decide anything. Does that make sense?
Yep, great.
So if I may, before I knew that you were our new designated, council representative, I did send out the information related to this particular parcel, last week. So it's not brand new to the commission members, but your point's fair, that it is a new idea, because we didn't realize until just recently that they were planning to, not renew their lease. So, and what I can do, to your point about, sharing it more broadly, is, the January edition of the airport newsletter is due out, probably the first of the week, and I can put a blurb in there, just kind of in broad terms, what we've chatted about a little bit today, and just ask for input, and just see if any ideas emerge, from that. So I'm happy to do that, definitely.
I think that's good. And if you could put something about the parcel size, just to give people an idea.
I will look into that, yes, with Brent and the building people, and see what I can find out about the size of the parcel itself.
Timothy,
Yeah.
any comments, questions, input?
I think, yeah, definitely if we could start looking into, what we could do with that land. I mean, my organization, for example, does want to have parking, so if that's an RFP that comes out or something like that, we think about it that way. We might be interested on bidding on that, so.
Okay, good, thank you. Your item 7 also, announcements.
So, Mr. Chairman, the only announcement, well, actually, a couple of items to share. As most of you are aware, we have, I should say, moved snow twice during this season. There was a snow scare, if you will, back in the Christmas weekend arena. And we received about a half an inch of snow. I want to say it might have been Thursday. And with that amount of snow and the forecast for no additional snow, I decided not to move that snow. At that amount is very difficult for the big machines to move. So Friday night, maybe it was Saturday, we did receive some freezing rain, which put a nice ice capper on our half an inch of snow, and tamped it down just a little in the process. And those of you that are subscribed to the NOTAM feed would see that on the NOTAMs, because those were adjusted as that occurred. Still opted not to make any attempt to move it, because again, the amount was still low. So on into the Monday after Christmas, and then on into Tuesday, and the melting began. And we basically rode through that event without moving the snow.
Did you get much blowback on?
None, actually, which is good.
Yeah.
Now, there were aircraft operating. They were mostly single engine piston aircraft, 4-seaters mostly, because they have no particular problem with snow, as long as it's not actually ice on the runway. So no, actually, no, it all actually worked out okay this time. I mention that just to keep on the forefront the notion that when we do call in the contractor, it has been, for a whole day's operation of the big machines, it has been as much as $10,000. So it's a non-trivial task when we call in the snow removal crew. And at that price point, we're typically talking about 2 full-size road graders and 4, again, full-size loader devices, and 6 people to operate them. Okay. So that's why Brent and the mayor have asked me to be the decision person on that, but to use some caution and, hopefully good judgment in making those calls. So,
Any other announcements?
yes, we are, moving forward with the tower, application process. The next step, I think I've announced previously, now that we have been, invited to participate in the contract tower program, the time clock, began a few months ago where they said, okay, we've approved you, Caldwell, your numbers work, you now have 5 years to get a tower, built, certified. Then we will pay through, federal funding for the operators that control tower operators to be your air traffic control people. So the next step in that process is to establish the site for the new tower. And in order to do that, we're required to have a siting study accomplished by the FAA Air Traffic Organization. We received the quote back for that, and it's $68,000 some odd dollars. And that is accomplished by an FAA contract document they refer to as a reimbursable agreement. The reimbursable thing is a somewhat fanciful notion that they may not spend all that they charge you. So they give you a quote for what they believe will be the exact price, and it's actually a no more than quote. And so we are in the process right now of preparing a resolution that will appear on City Council, I hope, the agenda for the 17th, to authorize that to be paid out of airport fund balance.
So does this mean the FAA, we don't have to do an RFP, the FAA just takes care of
No,
getting the study?
yes, they just do the study, right. So the agreement is, we pay them money, sign the agreement, they do the study, provide us a report back on what they find.
Okay.
So that will involve some input from myself, some from Toby, but it's mostly an FAA-driven task.
Okay, our master plan had a couple of sites. I assume that they did some studying, and those are the
Yes,
most likely.
we believe that I believe it's the upper site on that drawing is the likely location for the tower. But again, the study and our ALP and the master plan projections for where we're headed with hangar development and all that, they all play a role in the sight lines and how high, mostly it's a geometry problem.
Right.
How high the tower needs to be to permit controllers to see the required areas of aircraft movement.
And when you mentioned 5 years, is that the time period within which we have to have this thing built and ready for use? Approximately.
Yes, 5 years is the time window they've established for the validity of that review of our airport's qualification for that contract tower program. If we for some reason don't make the 5-year deadline, then we have to submit our information again from the most recent full year, and we get evaluated again.
So, sorry, I'm not quite clear on this. So we'll get the tower study done. We don't have to have it built within 5 years. That could go longer. It's not clear to me what we have to do within the 5 years.
The 5-year window does involve building the tower, yes.
Okay.
It's everything.
Okay.
It's ready to hand the keys over to the FAA people.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So once the siting study is complete, we will then have identified a specific plot of ground that they believe is the appropriate space. We then have to submit that space for environmental review. So that's the next step.
And so I think you indicated they'll pay to operate it, but we have to pay to build it?
Yes.
And so does that include all the electronics for all of this?
And the Netflix subscription. Yes.
Very important. Like the Boise Tower guys that went to sleep that night, we don't want them, when they can be watching.
But yes, Mr. Chairman, all of the costs of preparing everything is all on us. Their component is once this tower is built And their people come in and certify that we have the radios from their checklist, we have the appropriate, reception area, we have a break room, we have bathroom facilities, we have binoculars and a light gun and, connection to the weather and all, all that.
Will the tower study give us a budget for this?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, and we're not gonna be reimbursed by the FAA for the construction of all of this?
I'm hoping that we will be reimbursed for at least part of it.
Okay.
We are at a point in time where our president and Congress of this past year passed a bipartisan infrastructure law that has a very significant component for transportation projects. Among those are projects funded through FAA. And within the FAA's bucket of money from the BIL, there is a corner for new tower construction, where a tower does not exist now.
Okay.
And that is renewable for a 5-year time period. There's a lot of money involved
So,
in the overall bill.
so the pro forma that we have for the 5 and 10 years didn't include this cost. And so even if we get reimbursed, it sounds like we'd need to front it for a little while before we get reimbursed some or all of this. So is there sort of, at what point in this process can we kind of get an idea on the numbers and the revenue that's going to be required and what we think we might be reimbursed and all of that?
Well, we have a finger in the wind sort of idea of what the tower's cost will likely be, and that would be in the $4 to $5 million arena.
Okay, I apologize. It is in this budget at 5.5
Yes.
million. Okay, fair enough. And then this also shows that our share is 277,000. Pretty good.
That's assuming the grant funding model with that percentage match.
Okay.
We are looking to the future, and in one of those out years, toward the latter part of this 5-year BIL funding plan, we will apply for construction funding.
Okay.
We have already applied for funding to reimburse us for this $69,000 or $68,000 that we intend to, but almost all of this we do have to front up front,
Okay.
because reimbursement is not guaranteed. Now, when it comes time to actually build the tower, and it's a multi-million-dollar contract, we very well may wait to see if we're selected before we commit, because we don't have a fund balance of $4 or $5 million to draw from. So these early stages, yes, we'll probably front that money with the hope that we could get reimbursed, but we may not.
Okay. Comments, questions? Timothy? Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, Rob, I had one more question. I've gotten a number of emails about these, something being put on hose bibs because of the stormwater protection plan, and.
I'm sorry, something put on, I didn't understand.
On outside of the hangar hose bibs, are those being restricted in some way? I don't really have a good understanding of what this is. But
They have, we have frost-free spigots, I like to call them, frost-free water outlets that have the big handle that comes up, typically red.
okay,
I will call for backup here momentarily, so I hope she's preparing herself. But we have had issues where people have been misusing that water that's been provided typically by the city.
but this isn't the hose bib outside my hangar. This is something not attached to somebody's hangar?
It's not your hose bib, let's put it that way. We have, in the 100, 200, 300 area, we have a number of these frost-free outlets
Okay,
that are offered at no charge to the users. And that water has been misused and has led us down a difficult compliance path
okay.
with EPA.
But those are some sort of a standalone spigot?
Yes,
And
yes.
again, I have a spigot on the wall of my hangar.
That
Those
does
aren't-
not apply to you, no.
Okay,
So the spigots still offer the water at no charge to the users, but it has to be bucket. driven, not attach your own hose and do something
And
with it.
do you have an estimate or rough idea how many of those there are that are going to be?
5.
That's it?
I
5 on
believe,
the
I
whole
believe,
field?
I believe. Yeah, it's
Okay.
a small number,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Okay, any other questions, comments? I don't know if anybody else got an email on that. Okay, that was my question.
I didn't, what was the abuse? What was going on with the water that required the,
Council members, we've had a few violations. One of them is basically just using the water for excessive irrigation outside the hangar. We have one tenant who's irrigating about an acre, and not being charged for that city potable water. We had another tenant who chose to connect to that water to provide themselves with drinking water and cleaning water inside the hangar, and also providing an additional hose to provide basically sewer service into the storm drain at the airport. And then also, the tenants aren't allowed to connect up to those and use them as a free car wash anywhere in the airport because it does drain to Indian Creek. In the last 3 years, we have been prosecuted by EPA for stormwater violations, so we're particularly sensitive to trying to follow their rules. And so those were the reasons why we stripped the threads off of those frost-free hydrants so that water is still available, but no hose connection. I believe you've probably received some of the same emails I have, and presented the idea. I hope some of those people would be here today, that if they want a airplane wash, for lack of a better word, that's something that the city and the airport would need to fund, and obviously that would cause additional, rates, fees to the hangar owners at the airport. And that would be the proper way to wash an airplane on site. I was hoping that those individuals would be here to speak to that need for Robin, Brent, and the commission, but I don't see or hear anyone here today. So I'm kind of here to support Rob and take any questions.
Randy, comments, questions? Timothy? I have another question or two. Okay, I get I get this people watering their land for free. That I don't like. But did you get something specific from the FAA saying that of all of your stormwater violations, it's the Caldwell Airport that's the problem child? I mean, I wash my plane. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'm paying for the water, I guess. So a lot of people wash their airplanes, but we're going to restrict it at a few spots. So how refined is this this EPA complaint with respect to the airport?
Really, the airplane washing, there's no designated facility for it, and the issue is when that water that has soaps and debris and whatever in it gets into the storm drains, because there are many storm drains at our airport that go right to Indian Creek.
I understand that, and I'm not objecting to it, but let's say that there's 200 hangars that all have a place to wash their airplane, but these 7 all of a sudden can't. I mean, we're not really restricting the washing very much. So I need a little bit of a refined look at why the FAA is on these 5 and not all 200, or are we next?
Oh, are you talking about the previous prosecution?
Well, like, Timothy washes airplanes,
Mhm.
and he's okay, and Randy washes airplanes, and he's okay, but the 5 people using these spigots aren't okay, and so I'm not sure why.
Why? So I don't know specifically what their setup is, but it is okay to wash your airplane inside your hangar if you have sewer service.
Well, it won't be inside the hangar.
It should not be, no one should be washing their airplane and letting it go down the storm drain outside of the hangar.
So, you don't believe people spray down their airplanes inside their hangar, I hope?
I'm not at the airport every day.
Okay, well, I can tell you that's not what happened. So, Rob, help me here a little bit. An introduction. Yeah, ma'am, I'm sorry. Your name, please?
My name's Ashley Newbury, and I'm the Assistant City Engineer for the City of Caldwell.
Oh, okay, thank you.
This is one of those matters where at every corner, you're expected to use your turn signal. and not everyone honors that particular rule. So does washing occur outside of hangars, away from the potential to a sewer drain? Of course it does. Do we condone that by offering up water where it's readily available to violate that rule? Well, not anymore, because we were called on the carpet for it. Where we can influence that, we will. And with this line of discussion today, I will include this point in the coming newsletter. Okay. To great laughter and guffaws around the airport. Okay. Because I agree with you though. People certainly do wash their aircraft.
Okay. So I see on our master plan we've got a couple of wash racks in our future.
That's why I jumped up here. It's only about money, really. We are fully supportive of appropriate wash facilities, wash racks. Okay. There are two on the current master plan layout, one on each side, actually two on the south side, yeah. And one notional one on the north side. Okay. So we absolutely hope to end up with a wash rack facility. But depending on features, a wash rack might cost as much as $100,000 to install, with the appropriate grease trap, a sand separator, a water supply, redoing the paving, some safety measures, Wi-Fi, metering system, and on, lights, who knows? Anyway, it's an potentially expensive proposition, yes.
The plan shows one on the north side that it costed $250,000, but it shows the FAA paying for their normal share of that, and the city $12.5.
That's a big maybe.
Okay.
The FAA looks at that as something new and not and potentially something revenue generating. So they're not as crazy about funding that sort of thing. Okay. We may end up being eligible for grant funding for it. And the one on the north side, by the way, has a considerable more expense because it's dramatically larger. Okay. To accommodate much larger aircraft potentially. Yes.
All right. Any other? Sorry, I didn't mean to appear to be picking on you, but I get these emails and I didn't really understand. So, any other comments or questions?
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the help. Okay. Anything else from anybody here? Stan.
Yes. Ashley, thank you for attending. Ashley and I had the pleasure of communicating. At least it was a pleasure to me, but I was asking a lot of questions. Washing airplanes. I think a huge part of this is the communication.
Stan, could I ask you to come up to the microphone since we are streaming these now and recording them? It's probably important that we get on the mic.
Thank you for that.
Good reminder, thank you. Yes, commission members and audience, Stan Seward, interested stakeholder. So I was thanking Ashley for attending, and Ashley and I had emailed back and forth, and she explained to me to great detail, thank you, the intricacies of this spill protection plan and how I guess we've gotten ourselves in the ringer here, and it's a tough deal. The unfortunate thing is that there are some storm drains that do not go to Indian Creek. They're isolated, and they're also kind of in the area that you've or lost the threads on the spigots. So down there at the northwest end by Cascade Aircraft Management, the storm drain there does not go to the river. It's by itself. So if somebody were going to wash an airplane and not have it end up in Indian Creek or the river, from a practical standpoint, that's where one would want to do it.
Well, in fairness, she said some of it's storm drain, some of the people just abusing the use of the water. So I don't know if the spigot you described is in which of those two buckets.
understand the point, it's certainly valid, but, Cascade specifically was one of the tenants who was called out for washing parts outside their hangar, and it's not authorized, in an airport view, despite the fact that the single catch basin on their apron does not drain to Indian Creek. So, it's, you know, when they view the airport, they looked at specific commercial tenants and their operations, anything happening outside the hangar that's exposed to stormwater. And then also the airport as a whole. So there were specific tenants that also received, penalties from EPA, and then the airport as a whole, and Cascade was one of them, so.
Does that resolve that, Stan?
Yeah, I actually did not know that. I was more speaking just to the guy that wants to wash his airplane, which the FAA tells us, you know, in order to be airworthy, we need to clean our airplanes at least once a year as part of the process of, making sure it's airworthy. So, but like a lot of things in life, I guess I would say this, for me, has been a process of having to educate myself and understand what's going on, and part of this just comes back to communication. Rob, I think this idea of putting it in the newsletter is great. You know, 99% of the people out at the airport don't know this now, so it needs to go in the newsletter. The other comment I would have about the tower, and this is as a Caldwell taxpayer, I'm not particularly against a tower. I'm not for a tower. I think it comes with pluses and minuses. But what I am for is I am for airport commission involvement. And unfortunately, I think the tower is being pushed along without much discussion among the airport commission. So.
Well, I think the taxpayers are gonna be shielded from this expense if I get this, because the council's made it pretty clear that, the airport's gonna fund itself through FAA revenue or, rents or, you know, whatever source we can get.
And I would say nothing is free.
Well, I'm not sure how to apply that comment to this particular issue, but.
Well, I suppose I can say, when you're spending $5 million, somebody's paying for it.
Right.
Okay? It's not free. Okay? And I have that concern, both as a Caldwell resident and as a tax-paying citizen of the U.S.
It's a matter of your
government.
income tax, not your property tax.
So, and as I say, I'm not particularly for or against a tower, but I do want to see discussion. I think it was jumped several years forward on the schedule without discussion, and part of our stakeholder group, we're running ADSB trackers, so we know what kind of traffic we're having at the airport, and we're not really seeing the same numbers that were turned into the FAA, so we have a concern there as well.
Okay, I think your comment about, I mean, the city council did approve this master plan diagram and this spending schedule, and the tower has been advanced in it prior to what the council had approved when they accepted the master plan. So I assume that they've been advised of that and are okay with it. And, but we're still in a 5-year process, so it'll kick it out into the intermediate term.
Yeah, and I do look forward to more discussion. My last point would be, I know we've had a change of location for our airport commission meeting. I haven't noticed the public notices, you know, to our stakeholders when the meetings are going to occur and the agenda. So I think we might need to look at that process.
Lisa, is the agenda's posted on the website, right? And so I think, and the whole schedule of meetings is posted on the website, so it's whatever the first Thursday of every month, every week.
Yeah, I mean, I emailed you because I wasn't seeing it on the website.
It is there, but
Oh.
think it was last month, Steve said, hey, I find it, like right here on the website, it's right there. And I think it was you that, or anyway, 3 people said, and it was all right there. So I don't know why someone didn't see it, but it is there.
Okay.
And here, it's been there since December, and I always bring extras to the meeting.
Yeah. Okay. I agree, we need to make this all public and so everybody can attend if they want to. So,
Yeah.
I think it's being
And
done.
I posted at the airport as well, first Thursday of every
Okay.
month.
But it'll be the first Thursday of every month, right here at noon, so.
Thank you.
Okay, we're, just a couple minutes past our noon, time, so. Greg, go ahead. Would you step up to the mic as well, please?
The CPA thing's a problem. And, I've been to almost all the commission meetings for years. We didn't really know about it, and I think it reinforces the issue that I think a lot of people at the airport, if they knew the water situation was resulting in penalties, et cetera, they might be more receptive to trying to comply. I think there's just the basic lack of information. So if I could urge Rob to put some authority in his notice of why this is required, rather than, hey, you just can't wash your planes, you just can't spray water all over. I would urge the authority for it. I actually took time and read through, what is it, the SWWP, the stormwater requirements, and was quite surprised at the restrictions that are out at the airport, and I'd spent some time doing that. So that would be very important, I think, for, I call them the patrons of the airport, to understand the legal aspect of why they can't do what they're doing. But again, this all popped up. There was a little bit of information that somebody had been penalized at the airport, but none of the patrons, you're gonna have 98, 99% of the airport patrons just going, what? We can't use our hose bibs for doing this, because your private hangars all have hose bibs on the outside. It's the public ones over in what we call Old Town. So the issue there is just knowledge. Again, we've got to get this communication back up there, because otherwise everybody's going to rebel, and the pitchforks and the torches are going to come out again, just like the rent increase. You know, we've got to get that information out there to the folks out there.
Greg, do you have an idea of how many hangars and planes will no longer have access to plane wash?
Well, I think the estimate of 5 to 7 hose bibs is pretty close. I think I unfortunately started the issue about the hose bibs because I made an inquiry because I needed a bucket of water just to be able to go, you know, wash it, you know, like scrub a window.
But I think you indicated there's a number of hangars that don't have a hose bib on the side of their hangar, and those are the guys that are going to be most affected by this. Any idea how many there are like that?
Well, if you take from,
Isn't it all based here?
No.
yeah, I mean, your new, I think it's East and West Division, isn't that be about right, Rob?
Rob, would you have I don't want to belabor this too long, but. So it could be 120 airplanes that will not have a wash option?
Probably more.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And I was surprised, and as it was mentioned, those who have the approved building permitted drains connect to the sewer can wash their airplanes in the hangar.
I'll bet you money there's not a single hangar out there that has that approval. It's probably
But
just so you know,
no, I know, but it was rather unusual that you know, you can wash your airplane in your hangar. So anyway, just again, we've got, these things come up and everybody gets smacked in the head. We should be gently prodded over the years that we need to come into compliance rather than these things just jumping out time after time and everybody gets hit in the head, and then there's this big rebellion. The email campaign happens and everybody's irritated. So
fair enough.
Again, just watch out for that. And then
let's be careful on the tower, let's make sure we're not pricing the tenants out of their hangars trying to look at the hangar.
Right.
It's like, all of a sudden, here's the hangar, and if we're gonna self-fund it, then we're gonna be back to this rent increase again. So,
Right.
just a cautionary tale.
Good. Did you have a follow-up
Yeah,
on the?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say too, something that probably needs to, this stormwater needs to be kicked down the road a little further to the city. It's a responsibility to put on them. As a contractor, and what I've had to do just down there on the east end, we have to do SWIP programs, which is what Greg talked about. We have to put what they're called witches hats. We've got to put silk fence up. We've got to do all this. If you guys see the little 2-3 foot orange fencing or black fencing, our storm drains used to have that, and most of it's deteriorated and gone. The storm drain that is currently right next to my brown hangar, I have put that back in because I kind of landscaped around it, and I know we're not even supposed to have rocks fall into storm drain. And I know when the EPA was out there, they specifically came and talked to me because I'm one of the commercial hangars. We've had that conversation. So this needs to go back to the city a little bit on the airport side, and it not be all our fault of misappropriation of water, and it needs to go back to the street department and say, hey, you need to fix your silt fences around these storm drains, and you need to properly maintain the storm drains that are out there.
Well,
And it can't be put on to the hangar owner that's by it. I chose to do it because I understand the process. I'm probably one of maybe 4 out there that would. And it was the airport's problem that caused the EPA for the fine, and, you know, there's a whole lot of finger pointing. Well, some of it needs to go back to city-ran airport, city-maintained airport, the city needs to do that. Because what happened with the weeds, sorry, Rob, is unacceptable. You're responsible for the weeds around your hangar. No, I don't lease that land, I can't use that land, I'm not gonna take care of that land. And that's kind of where the storm drains are at now, and they need addressed.
Do you think that the city could do something to those storm drains that would allow, let's say, airplane washing but not cause a problem with the EPA, or is that hard to say?
The airplane washing is probably just what they're pointing a finger at. It's probably not the big cause of it. You know, if I wash my airplane in back of my hangar, the water doesn't run to the storm drain. It sits on the tarmac or the taxiway and it
Evaporates.
Yeah, the soap's still there, and if we get enough rain, but think of all the oils that are coming off the taxiways from the pavement and the resurface or the re-oiling of it and everything. I think it's just something they're using. That's a personal opinion, that's no scientific. But, so to handle that, no, as far as the washing, I think there's something to do with that. But the silk fences and stuff is something that needs to be addressed. And that's, the street department knows how to do it, they do it all the time, it's just something that's neglected.
Okay.
And I think that would help alleviate the EPA coming down on it. So, was my take when I talked to the EPA representative that was out there 4 years ago, maybe, 3 years ago.
Timothy,
I just heard
input on this?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we're already over time, but, I'm seeing several issues here. One of which is we might need to figure out a wash rack sooner than later,
Right.
that effectively solves the problem at the same time. To just throw it back on the city is having our cake and eating it too. That's why we have an airport commission to help figure it out.
Yeah,
So we can go to the city and say the airport commission recommends this is the pathway forward so that we can solve these problems. But it just gives us more to talk about.
Rob, do you have an idea when the first wash rack is gonna be available on the south side? I don't see it in the master plan timing.
We don't have a funding, path for it just yet.
Hi, I'm Lisa from the airport, and we do have that in the plans, and I didn't bring it with me. I was working on the wash rack thing last year before I got hit with, you have to do hangar inspections on every single hangar. So I was working on that, got put on the back burner, but I can bring it forward. The cost is already figured out, and I have all those papers, and I can actually, so if we're gonna put that on next month's agenda, I can put a copy in that.
So that would be
Because it
great.
has the cost and everything.
So if you could, the timing, and the cost, and how much of that cost the city would have to pay.
Yeah, and I don't have the timing, I just have the information that I
Okay.
was trying
Fair
to
enough.
get that,
Okay.
okay.
Good, thank you. Okay, I think that's it then. Oh, I'm sorry, Rob,
No, I was just gonna say, I hope that's it, because there's another meeting at 1:30, so we do need to
Okay.
wrap
All
today.
right.
Thank you.
I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Some,
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
I,
Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
How do I get NOTAM updates?